Welcome, everyone. This is one of many of a illustrious series that was put on by Compassionate Brattleboro in helping to get us think about how do we make compassion actionable. In 2017, as most of you may already be aware, the town of Brattleboro decided to sign a charter. The Brattleboro residents voted overwhelmingly to follow the International Charter of Compassion. Just to give you a little bit of background, this International Charter of Compassion got started in 2008 when author Karen Armstrong received a TED Prize. And during this prize, she made a wish. She wanted to help create, launch, and spread a charter for compassion, and she wanted to spread it for just all around the world. This concept, after a lot of human hours, after thousands upon thousands of contributions around the world, it was officially launched in November 2009. Our very own charter can be viewed on the town website, and I believe we have copies here, right, tonight? Okay, but that's okay. You can view it on the town website if you so wish. I also just want to add that we should never underestimate the power of making a wish. I think this is such an example of how a wish spoken with intention became action, and how the combination of these things along with passion created an environment for turning vision into reality. And a vision and reality that became so infectious that the whole world, including Brattleboro, could not help but to be a part of this said vision and reality. So what is Compassionate Brattleboro? Compassionate Brattleboro is a group of residents, members of various faith communities, and many other stakeholders who are formed to support the implementation of the charter on all levels of the community. In terms of my own involvement, at one of my first select board meetings at the beginning of each board, as we get new board members, you are tasked with setting the agenda and your goals for that given year of the select board. And both during my run and as I got on select board, I kept thinking, well, how are we going to make compassion actionable? We can talk about it, know what it means in theory, but how do we make it actionable? And how do we create tools for compassion here? I also wish that the whole concept of compassion in business was something that was covered in my MBA program years ago. But who knows, you could probably push to get that started now, right? This conversation, as I mentioned before, is a series that's a part of Compassionate Brattleboro's attempt to actually make it livable and also have discussion, ask questions, and be thinking about what are the tools and what do we mean, and specifically as it relates to being here, what is compassion? And specifically as we bring this tonight, what's compassion in business? So for those of you who know me, I like roots and words, and compassion, the very root of it means to suffer with. But I'm most interested in looking at how do we envision, instead of suffering with, how do we grow with as a community and create a community that knows and acts with compassion. So for tonight, you're going to be hearing, as it relates specifically to the business community, what are we already doing, how can we improve, how do we bridge the gap, what is needed in order to improve unsaid practices of compassion as it relates to business. I'm joined by Stephanie Bonin, who is the Executive Director of Downtown Brattleboro Alliance, Joseph Sanada of Line Sync, he is the Principal Architect, Adam Grinold of Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, he's the Executive Director, and Kate OConnor, who is Brattleboro Area Chamber of Commerce Executive Director and most recently served as the chair of on the Brattleboro Select Board for the past 6 years. So join me in this welcome, and we are going to get started with a few questions, really just a couple of round of questions, and starting with each of you and we'll start with you, Stephanie. just giving us a snapshot of your organization, what you do, what you're already doing as it relates to compassion in business or in the encouragement of other businesses and or daily practices. Each of our speakers for this first round will get 10 minutes. You will hear a lovely ding on my phone when you're down to 1 minute. So if you hear something funky going on, that's just their signal. So I will give you a chance to get started.
Thank you. Thank you to Jim from the Compassion Committee for inviting me to be here and for Shanta for moderating. Is the volume okay? Okay. So Downtown Brattleboro Alliance is the Main Street organization for Brattleboro. We cover a geographical area that's deemed the Downtown Improvement District, and everyone in that district, so residents, businesses, organizations, and merchants. So I am the lucky one that gets to represent that very diverse community. Our mission is to increase the vitality of downtown with commerce, culture, and community life, or I should say increase the vitality through commerce, community, and culture. There are many things that I could point to when thinking about this, and really where my mind went was that compassion is a feeling, and that I immediately went to what are compassionate actions that businesses do, which is what Shanta alluded to, was taking it that next step to compassionate actions. I feel that the best way to talk about it is through the businesses themselves, and so I get to tell you some stories through the businesses. So I have 3 stories to tell you. The first is from Kristen, who owns BodyFit, a yoga studio on High Street. And there was a day that she was opening up her studio for class, and she opened up the door, and there standing was a man who said nothing, looked at her, and she paused, and then he said, "I need to take a yoga class." And she said, "Okay." And he said, "I don't have anything. I just came from a halfway house and I have nothing." And she said, "Well, come on in." So he came in, he practiced yoga that day, and then he continued to practice for 6 months. And they would have conversations sometimes, and sometimes it would just be a class. And after 6 months, he went away. She didn't see him again, but later learned that he now has a wife and a baby and lives on a farm somewhere in Vermont. The second story is about Chris, and I changed his name, by the way. Chris and Dick. Dick is the owner of, with his wife, of the Vermont store, Old Galannis's. And Dick is also an amazing volunteer for DBA and does the flower program in downtown. So Dick often is on the streets at 4:30 in the morning. And so Chris would appear on the streets at 4:30 in the morning, and they started to have a conversation every now and then. And pretty soon, Dick started engaging him a little bit more, and they became friends, and he would every now and then help Dick with watering or other jobs that Dick had. And so with time realized that he needed a job, Chris needed a job. And so Dick came to me and said, "You know, I have this guy and he's looking for a job. Do you have a job?" And I said, "Actually, Duo is hiring," which I also own with my husband, and so let me call over. So I called over to my husband, Keith, and said, "We're gonna send you this guy who's looking for a job." He interviewed him, and he hired him on the spot, started training him as a dishwasher. This was not a pass-off. This was not passive on Dick's part. He would text me and say, "How is Chris doing?" And so pretty soon it was a little bit contagious. I would check in with my husband, "How is Chris doing?" And then I would relate it to Dick. "Chris is doing great." And it was interesting, that energy grew to the entire staff. So all of a sudden people really had this very protective feel to them, which was not, I wouldn't say that's usual in a new staff member coming on. So fast forward to Thanksgiving, and my chef went to Keith and said, I just found out that where Chris is living, the Phoenix house, they don't have a Thanksgiving dinner. And so we as a staff want to come together and create a Thanksgiving dinner for the Phoenix house. And so he said, of course. And that is what happened. Every single one of the staff members did something to contribute to this meal, and the chef brought the meal over to the Phoenix house the night before Thanksgiving. The last story is one that in conversations, it is the difference between generosity and compassion. So I think any business owner in the audience could say that they get asked plenty of times for gift certificates for donations. And in talking with a couple people, they said, oh, no, that's just being generous. And then we looked up the definition of compassion, and what evolved from that conversation was those gift certificates are not being given for the tax donation write-off or for the marketing that the organization is promising that they will get by giving these gift certificates. The gift certificates are being given because that business owner really cares deeply about the person who's coming to them or cares deeply about the organization that's asking. That aside, to take it another level, Erin from Elliot Street Fish and Chips and then DBA and Kids Place created a program called Playdate. And Playdate is a by donation childcare once a month in the downtown. And the goal was to give parents that much needed break, whether they could afford it or not, and to give kids a fun time, and to get people to be taking that break in their community center, in their heart, which is downtown. And so for the first 8 months or so, both Hazel and Elliot Street Fish and Chips gave freely food for each of the kids that came to that play date. At our peak, it was 35 kids that came and that they gave food for that event. I have lots of other stories, but I will leave it at that. I think one of the things that I found in thinking about this discussion and gathering them all in one place is that it further cemented that downtown is full of incredibly inspiring and generous and compassionate business owners. But more important, that business is far greater than commerce. Thanks.
Nice.
So if you'd like, I can repeat the question.
Yes, please do.
All right. So again, this is still in first round, and so we're asking all of our speakers to give a snapshot of their organization, what they do, what they are already doing with compassion and as it relates to businesses and daily practice.
Super. Can everybody hear me? Cool. My name's Joseph Sincata. My wife, Julie, and I'm a stand-in tonight for Julie, by the way. I want to stand up so I can see everybody's faces. Is that okay? But I wanted to just say we run a practice called Line Sync Architecture in Wilmington, Vermont. And we've done work even in this fair city at the Strolling of the Heifers with Shanta. I just wanted to give you a brief idea, because one of the things that we cherish really strongly is inclusion of a lot of different types of designers. I basically want to sit down with people who look, think, and talk differently than I do. As you might say, I speak the Queen's English fairly well, born and raised in Queens, New York. But I try to get people who think differently. Currently, we have somebody who's born and raised in Puerto Rico, in San Juan. We just left somebody from Bangladesh, went back, and we're just constantly bringing people from around, and we have a waiting list. Basically, people want to work for us. They hear about us online, and and they want to work for us, and we have a very kind of inclusive practice. So I just want to roll one small little clip from our website.
I'm still good.
What?
I'm still good enough.
You got warm water? You can't.
Ramble, ramble, ramble.
Okay to ramble.
You got it.
Because I need this to match. Just feel it naturally.
1, 2, 3, natural.
Okay.
Do you want to check that one more time? I think I moved.
The best thing about working at Line Sync is probably,
The fact that you feel like you're within a family.
you know, if we need to go for a hike or we want to go for a run, or in the winter if it's a, you know, killer powder day, then we're the first ones out on the slopes.
I love coming here and each of the people that we have, which are very different personalities and how they interact. That energy, I feel like I'm so lucky to be in this place.
Most awesome thing about Line Sync is
Joseph and Julie are wonderful people to work with. The whole team is a lot of fun. We're all friends. We all get together after work.
You know, being a designer or in any design-based field,
it's not all about work. You can also have fun with your life. But work is also awesome and fun as well.
you really need to be on your A game all the time. So we need that fresh air, we need that adrenaline rush, we need that exertion to sort of.
Okay, we'll go with that. We're gonna let technology speak for that. What you're seeing, actually, it's really interesting. This fellow, Ryan, went off after working with us for 3 or 4 years, married a woman from India, and moved to Boston to get his license as an architect. Got the experience, and he actually came back in October with the idea that I want to figure out a way to work with you guys, because I was born and raised in Stowe, Vermont. I just love the energy of what, you know, how you guys interact, and I just want to be part of that, but I want to live in Stowe. So we're actually doing something which goes to the very founding principle of why my practice is not Joseph Sincata Architect, it's Line Sync. And it has to do with Lineberger, my wife, Sincata, me. And it's this idea of I didn't want it to be a name, I wanted it to be a family, as they said. And I wanted people to feel like they could set up their own practice. So Ryan, this man, got Line Sync Architecture Studio of Ryan, and he is Ryan Edwards, and he's up in Stowe. We just went for a big project up in St. Albans together. So we're looking at ways to kind of infectiously engage people in the interaction, and the way we do that is through compassion, actually. So when somebody comes to us and says, you know, they've got some tough time, or they may need a loan, or they may, you know, need some help. Kendrick Waterman, the very first fellow who's speaking, Kendrick wanted us to be his God. So I'm a godfather to his 2 kids, and it comes very naturally, being Sicilian, to be a godfather, as you know. And I take my job very seriously. So yesterday, or last Sunday, I was over there at his house, working on ways to, he's renting to buy, and, you know, just engaging how we could develop it and so forth and so on. So it steps outside of the bounds, but then I get 110% back when we are intense. And it is intense, and I'm not always a fun, nice guy. Sometimes I'm wearing an A on my forehead, you know, for, I'll let you figure out what that means. But, you know, it's like you look in the mirror and go, oh shoot, I was the putz today. And I'll just go like, hey Shanta, sorry, I was a bit of a putz. Can you forgive me and let me go? And she'll like, and just that human interaction, right? That compassion and admitting it when we're not well is what's really cool, because then I get this kind of loyalty back. And it's okay to make mistakes. So I wanted to point out that it's kind of a two-way street. Like, we're not always on our A game, right? I mean, there are times where we're just, didn't click right when you woke up this morning. I don't know what that, but we all been there. And essentially, when you are compassionate, you get it back. And that's the really cool thing. So I like to think, we run a world-class practice. And that's just not us, just because we have diversity in our team. It's because I'm competing against the best and the brightest because it inspires me to do better. So on Monday, we were published in Fast Company magazine, an idea that we have for park walks. If anybody wants to ask, but it just got published as ideas that could change the world. And we may be doing a park walk on the Green Street School, which is basically a park garden on the gymnasium that's connected by a bridge, and a recycled iron bridge that goes to the park behind it. So feel free to ask me about that later, and I see my time's running up. The other thing is yesterday was Tuesday? Yeah. Yesterday we just published in Dwell magazine. Some of you may have seen our wheel pad, which is this handicap accessible bedroom and bathroom that attaches to your house. I was just showing Adam, whose company helped get us started, and his associates, a project where we're putting 3 of them together to make a kind of a community out of 3 of them under one larger roof. But that's been taking off. So that was just published in Dwell magazine yesterday. I don't know if it's in the print copy, but it's online right now. You can see as one of the top under $60 tiny houses. The dirty secret about tiny houses is the budget's not so tiny, and we managed to keep it tiny. So I said that our competition, is the world. I like to think that we are competing against New York City in some way for talent, right? So one of the things you hear is, oh, look, there aren't many great jobs here, so I can be an a-hole for you, because where else are you going to go? And that's so wrong. I mean, that's why people leave here and go back to the city, because if somebody treats you like that, you just go down the street and you can find another person. I'm a New Yorker. I'm going to say one thing. Frank Sinatra sang the song about, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. BS. If you can make it in Brattleboro, you can make it anywhere. You can absolutely make it anywhere. So that's a 1 minute, right? I've got 60 seconds. All right. So yeah, if you can't make it in New York City, check your pulse, because it's so easy with millions of people to always find the right connection. What we can do better here is value each other and not be the fool that says, there aren't many great jobs, so you have to suffer with me. Because when you stop doing that and you actually work well with each other, you compete. From this small little town, from my town, I only have 1 stoplight, so I'm even smaller than y'all. You can compete and show up in Fast Company magazine and Dwell magazine right there with all the people in the big city. That's where I'm going to let it go. Thank you.
So for those of you who just joining us, I am Shanta Lee Gander, and I'm moderating a discussion about how do we bridge business and compassion. And so, Kate, just to re-ask the question, just give us a snapshot of your organization and what are you already doing around compassion and engagement with other businesses, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you, Shanta. Once again, I'm Kate O'Connor, and I'm the Executive Director of the Brattleboro Area Chamber of Commerce. And up until 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was on the Brattleboro Select Board, and I actually had the pleasure of voting for the Charter for Compassion that was adopted here in the town of Brattleboro. And it seemed like such an obvious thing to do, but sometimes the obvious things aren't obvious. And I think it sort of acts as a daily reminder of the community that we really want to be. And I think in most ways we are, but you always need that reminder of what do we want to attain as a community. So I was really pleased that we, as a select board, we adopted it, and as the town, wide vote. So I think we're lucky that we are who we are. The Chamber of Commerce, I don't know if anyone knows, but we're located right downtown between Brown and Roberts and the Wyndham Flowers. We're not just a business organization, we also call ourselves a community organization as well. We are a membership organization, and we have about 400 members, and they are from large businesses, small businesses, every sector you can think of. I had to write some of them down. Manufacturing, whether that's the traditional manufacturing or the food manufacturing, beer, spirits. We have hospitality, retail, restaurants, arts, recreation, hospitals, services such as lawyers, retailers, insurance agents. We have contractors, farmers, and a lot of nonprofits. Area nonprofits are members of our chamber. We also have community members, people who have retired from business and still want to stay involved, and they joined the chamber. Our main mission is to make sure that Brattleboro is a great place to live, work, and play. We want it to be a thriving community, because if we all do well, or some of us do well, we all do well, and it makes our community do well, and that's really our daily mission. When I was thinking about the question of business and compassion, I sort of have a similar take on the Joseph and Stephanie, because businesses aren't just bricks and mortar. You know, you drive downtown or you drive around the town and you see the bricks and mortar businesses, but they're not just bricks and mortar. They're about the people who actually work there and who actually own the businesses. And if you think about it, when you go into a business, they're your friends, your neighbors. You know, they may be people you know from walking down the street. So we have that, you know, community of who we are, and we're people. And as I see it, compassion in business is really no different than the compassion that we should have in our daily lives. It's not something you hold in your hand. You can't hold it and say, this is compassion. It's something that's within each of us. And we bring to what we do every day, whether you're in your office or whether you're at your home or whether you're walking down the street, you bring with you the experiences that you've had in your life, your values and your history. And so I think that's when somebody is running a business, they're running it from the perspective that they come, you know, with who they are. And they bring those values to the business, they bring those values to how they treat their employees. In a lot of ways, I've always thought that, and we think about this at the chamber too, is how you not only live your life, but how you run your business is a reflection of who you are. And you hire the people that have the values that you have, which of course it's important that we hope that we get employees that have those values, because if they don't, obviously they don't continue to work for you. But it's really important that whether it's the board or it's the executive director or whoever you are, you set a tone for where you work. One of the things we do in the chamber is we're often the face of, or not the face of the community, we're partly the face of the community, because when people come to town, whether they're visiting or they want to move here, they don't know where else to go. So they say, oh, the chamber. It's like we have the big eye for information out front. We don't, but that's what people see. And they come in and they will talk to us about why they want to move here. And what was really been interesting for us since January 2017, January 20th, 2017, we had a lot of people who came into the chamber from other states who said, you know, we just can't live in the state we live in. We want to come and live in a state like the state of Vermont, where you have the values that you have. And they look at us and they say, you know, we looked at the map, one of the places we're going to come and think about living is Brattleboro, because we learned a lot about you folks and we really appreciate what you do. So it's been very interesting for us, my colleague and I who work at the chamber, to really sort of see people that are, some people are being more thoughtful in where they want to live and why they want to live somewhere, and people are, you know, coming here, and it's been an interesting experience. I won't say you probably getting what I'm saying. It's been really interesting since January 20th, 2016 or 17 to see where people's values are. There's one story that I do really want to tell you, because it was it's been very impactful for me and my other colleagues in the chamber. It was about, I don't know, towards the middle of last year, I got a phone call. Someone called the chamber and they said, I'm thinking about moving to Brattleboro. Can you give me some information? And we went through the perfunctory, well, here's the school system and here's what jobs you can have. But then the individual started to tell me about why they wanted to move to Brattleboro. They were from another state. They had a family, they had a job, they had a community that they had lived in for years. But the individual decided that they wanted to live life as their authentic self, and their family, some of their family members turned their backs on this individual. The people, their coworkers, turned their backs on this individual, and they weren't really welcome in their community anymore. And so we started having a conversation about what were the values of the people in the town of Brattleboro. And I remember we had a really, really long conversation. And I said, people in Brattleboro are very accepting, they're very kind, they're very compassionate. We don't often, we're not a perfect community, I was very clear on that. I said, but we really strive to be a community that takes care of one another. And I said, if I'm pretty sure, never want to say 100%, but I said, I'm pretty sure if you come here knowing your story, you will be accepted. So I hung up. This is like a half an hour conversation. And I hung up and, thought about it for a while, and then, life goes on. And it was earlier this year that I was at a meeting, and there were people that were getting up and talking, and an individual got up and they started talking, and they were telling parts of their story. And all of a sudden I realized that's the person that called the chamber, and I had this half-hour conversation with. And what was wonderful about it was, and subsequently the person has stopped into the chamber, and we've had personal conversations, and it's very clear that this person embraced Brattleboro, is really getting involved and very active, and has found that they have been embraced by the citizens of Brattleboro as well. And I remember my first reaction when they got up and were talking, I thought, oh, I'm so excited, this is this person. And I was excited for them because they were able to actually come to a place and feel welcomed. And I was actually really happy for Brattleboro because we had a person like this person come and become part of our community. And so there's that mutual learning and sort of understanding each other. So that really, since last year, that's really one of the most impactful conversations I've had with somebody who's called the chamber and said they wanted to live here. And for me, it really was, that's what really compassion is all about on our end and on that other individual's end. And I got gonged, so I will stop.
You have a minute if you want to wrap up with anything you want to add.
No, I think I said it all. Thanks.
Okay, cool.
Hi, my name is Adam Grinold. I'm the Executive Director of the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. In thinking about tonight's discussion, I wanted to understand how it is that an organization like ourselves or any of us bring compassion to our work. So I thought about, well, we all, much like Kate said, and we're going to sound like we worked on this together, I promise you we didn't. Much like Kate said, we always bring our old selves to every new interaction. So in thinking about it, I thought back to, well, who taught me compassion? It was in the curriculum in elementary school and high school. It was College 101. No, of course not. It's our surroundings. So I grew up in a fairly unique situation in a country inn. So my home was the family business. And as a young 7-year-old, I didn't know anything about hospitality. I knew the rules about hospitality. No running, no playing, you weren't allowed. It was a country inn. We had our place where I could go and do my things as a child with my friends, but as part of that environment, it just wasn't always right out in front and center. Later, as I was being trained in hospitality, I wasn't aware of the skills and the values that were being instilled. But eventually, later in life, as a general manager of that family business, I began to realize the value of emotional intelligence. When you have people who've driven 7 hours in a snowstorm, checking in at 10 o'clock at night, they bring 2 pieces of luggage you can see and about 10 you can't. They have a lot of luggage with them. And then on Sunday, you get to see them depart with the 2 pieces of luggage and no other luggage, because you've watched them in this very intimate setting sort of relax. And you have to greet people where they are. You don't know in hospitality what's coming at you. It could be someone who's had a great day, someone who's ready to relax, or someone who's really just not there. But you have to be able to understand where people are. So I share that because in conducting business or in relationships, it's always about that understanding. So when I think about my interactions with folks out in the community here now in this position and those on the team, I built a team that really reflected a lot of those values that I have that were instilled in me in my family business. It's really critical to have people with shared values. It's equally as important, if not more, with diverse opinions, diverse backgrounds. So you can have 2 teams that are with equal training, but and equal values, but if you don't, the one with the diversity of opinion, of backgrounds, they're gonna be the ones who bring fresh ideas, who can innovate their way through a solution that a less diverse group won't come up with. So when we were identifying what are our internal values of our team, I did an exercise where everyone, without notice, was asked just to write down 7, 10 things that they valued about their coworkers or about the work that they did. And I'll share some of those. Somewhere here, here we go. We have collaborative, transparent, respectful, humor, supportive, camaraderie, openness, safe to fail, integrity, curious, caring, trustworthy, unity, cohesion, positive, risk-taking. Those are some of those traits that were identified amongst the team. We boiled those down into our internal vision statement. You did not hear compassion, but if you listen closely, you have a lot of those traits and values that are important in compassion. And compassion really is the glue that holds all of those values together when we're out conducting our business. So as a leader, though, you need to take that a little step further. So imagine, if you will, that I am a sales manager at a car dealership, and Kate has not hit her numbers for 3 weeks in a row. So I go to Kate, I say, Kate, what's going on? You haven't hit your numbers. If you don't get it together, you're out of here in the next 2 weeks. Or I could say, Kate, I noticed that you're not performing to your usual standards. Is everything okay? Is there something going on at home? And those 2 different approaches will get you 2 very different results. The first will maybe get you the performance you want, but the person did it out of fear or some other driver that was not internal to themselves. So instead it could be the second option. Maybe I talk to Kate and we say, oh, Kate says, well, yeah, there is something going on. I've got my 3 nieces, well, my brother is being treated for an illness. We could say, oh, well, Kate, why don't you come in late or leave early for a few days until this passes, and then if you choose to, you could work more and get those numbers back or whatever. But what we've done now is Kate is more vested, more invested in our personal relationship as well as the work she does. And so for me, leadership is really the key to compassion in our own leadership, our self-leadership, or as a team goes, because what we're really doing is we're responsible for our charge. We're not in charge. And if we go through life and business of always remembering to watch out for our charge instead of trying to tell our charge what to do, I think you get lifelong people who are committed to you, to the team, and who then bring those same shared values out into the world as they conduct their business. So, I didn't get gonged, but I think I'll leave it there for now. Thanks, everybody.
So we will move to the next round, and we can just break it up or see who wants to start this next round. So this comes to the question around growth or improving upon some of the things that you talked about, or how can we make this infectious? So 2 quick questions around this. How do we help businesses live the value of compassion? Like, what are some ways we can help with that, and so which leads into my second question of what support is needed. So again, how do we help businesses live the value of compassion with the environment that they create or who they serve? And also, what are the supports or tools needed for that? For this, looks like, yeah, we have some time. So I will make this, I'll give you each 7 minutes on this. And you can choose who'd like to go first.
Suppose we don't take 7 minutes, we just kind of riff.
That's
You
fine.
knew what I was going to ask. So I'm going to drop an F-bomb here. And it's not the one you're thinking. The real F-bomb that we're all kind of quaking about is the word fun. If you admit to having fun in business, people don't take you quite as serious. It's like, wait a second, I'm a professional. I, and put on airs. I got, graduate degrees and all kinds of credentials. There's this hero in architecture, a Roman dude actually, named Vitruvius. So probably 3,000 years ago, maybe 2,500, Vitruvius wrote the 10 books of architecture. And he was the first person to write about architecture, right? Up to that point, it's just been sort of building. But we've been building serious things. We got some pyramids going on. We've done some things. But he was like, what is it? What is it about architecture? I'm going to tie this all together, by the way. So just bear with me a second. So he's like, what is it about, a building that makes it special, that makes it architecture? There's lots of buildings that, like that house right out there with that beautiful green roof that somebody stuck the boxes in front of. I mean, clearly there was a sense of care there that is sort of not there in the boxes in front of it. And when the time comes to take buildings down because they've outlived their use, I'm going to bet you that of those 2 buildings, I think it's pretty easy to figure out which one's going to go first. So that sort of specialness, the buildings that actually remain of the many that we build, is kind of interesting, because buildings are the most expensive thing humans built, all right? So it's where we are most serious about what we invest in. Very serious, right? The antithesis of fun. So Vitruvius is like trying to figure out, okay, what is going on? What makes something special? And he came up with 3 words. Firmitas, which is Latin for firm, not too hard to figure that one out. We really like it when our buildings stand up. We don't want them to fall down. So firmness is pretty good. Then we have comitas, commodity, functionality. I guess those are the translation of the Latin word. So like functionality, function, form follows function, all that. Was a famous maxim from the modern era. Form must follow the function, and it should be useful. Like, we should put restrooms in our buildings. Otherwise, they're not incredibly useful. running out to the John is not a great idea in the winter or in the summer or pretty much anywhere. So we've all, like, we do the firmness and we do the utilitarian. We make sure that it satisfies certain functions, certain bodily needs, all the things that we need. We like heat and warmth in our buildings, That building there was probably built in the time before central heat, the green one, the beautiful Second Empire French house over there. So they had just fireplaces where you got warm, but it was important to have fireplaces. They didn't know about central heat back then. These sort of utilitarian things come in. But then I'm going to get to the third word. And I don't remember the Latin, but it's the English translation is delight. 2,500 years ago, a learned person came up with the three most important things in an architecture. The first one you can figure out, it should stand up. The second one, it should be useful. The third one, as important as the first two, was fun. And fun is why we're compassionate to each other. So if you're doing your work and you're really working hard, and at the end of the day, wow, it's hard. Are you having fun? It's like, so it's a built-in way. It's like a built-in app, right? It's like a phone app. If you don't feel fun in your body to some degree, you're missing a really good chance to be compassionate, to succeed. Because I really believe that when you have that passion, when you have that fun, you thrive. It's just good business sense.
Thank you. So we can do exactly like what Joseph did. Whether you want to do a riff, whether you want to share a story or something, again, going back to the main questions of how do we help businesses live the value of compassion, and what tools would we need to help them do that and embody that? 7 minutes.
So I think in business specifically, we have to ask ourselves, why are we in business? So if you own a business, and what is the purpose? What is your goal? You have to earn enough money to keep the heat on, to pay for the building so it doesn't fall over. You have some goals. You need to pay the people who are working in the business. After that, then what are you in business for? So are you in business to win? Are you in business to be the best at something? And if you're engaged in this business, are you trying to beat your competitor? We're gonna sell more Subway sandwiches than the next one. What is the purpose that you're doing? And I think too often it's easy for people in business to think they have to crush the competition. They must win. And those folks aren't really aware of the game they're in. Because does their competition, are they aware that they're playing this game? Do they know that they're trying to sell more burgers or crush the other person? So if they don't know that they're playing the game, there's really no way their opponent can win, right? You need to have two people who know that they're competing against each other to win. So if we can step back from that and not try to always just crush the competition, and instead say, why am I doing this? What is the purpose? What is the goal? And you can sort of play the long game and just have your own internal goals, your own needs being met, and be able to share that with your community. I think we will, if everyone could do that, we would be in a better place.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, I won't take 7 minutes, I don't think, unless I start going on and on and on. And this probably isn't really the answer to the question, so if it isn't, I'm sorry, but I just want to, what Adam said the first time he spoke was about the hospitality industry, and when somebody's checking in at the desk, you just don't know what their story is, and they're either frazzled because they were in a traffic jam, or they're all excited because they're on vacation. I think about that daily in the job that I'm in, because again, we get people that are really happy to be here, or they're mad because batteries died on their car. We had that happen the other day, and there are people that automatically come in and assume that business person's bad, or that person on the street is bad, and I always think about if I could say something to some of these people, or even to myself some days, we got to be a little less judgmental of each other, because we really don't know what everybody's story is. And I think sometimes there are assumptions that are made about certain businesses, like, they're awful, they're just in it for the money. And there's a story behind what's going on that we don't know about. And for our own self at the chamber, we're not constantly, but we have people will call us up and say, you guys are evil because you're part of the National Chamber of Commerce. And we spend our time going, heck no, we have nothing to do with the National Chamber of Commerce. We don't give them any money, they don't give us anything. So there's that, you're automatically sometimes pegged as being evil because they think you're associated with somebody else. And so I would just, from various perspectives, think that we all have to keep in mind, whether you are a business person, whether you're a consumer, whether you're somebody that works, retail or whatever you do, I think we have to be more sensitive to really, sometimes checking ourselves and realizing, we really don't know the backstory of what we might be perceiving as a truth that really isn't a truth. And I think if we did that, we might, think of things a little bit better. And I'd like to Adams, think about it. You're at the reception desk and somebody's yelling at you, but there may be a real reason, had nothing to do with you, that they're like they are. So I just think we all need to remember we all have a story that we bring to everything that we do every day. And that's probably not the answer to the question, but I felt like I needed to say it.
That's okay. That's good. Actually, what this means is we'll have more time for questions and dialogue soon. So, Stephanie.
I'm excited to hear what questions there are. I think I would just add that the original question was, should we have more compassion in business in Brattleboro? And I think there's always room for growth and always room to be better. And more to the point, I think there's always room for intentionality, which is what this charter has brought about for our community and internationally. If I could have a wish, it would be for there to be more compassion for ourselves, and also in that, I think what would become is more camaraderie among the businesses. I thrive off of talking to people and engaging with people and getting inspired and riffing and talking, and I would love to see Brattleboro grow in that direction as a place for improvement, as there's lots of improvement in every area. That would be my one.
Thank you. So, just summarize briefly. You've heard from the panel in terms of talking and thinking about how do you embody compassion as a business owner or in business, either in the environment of who you are serving and who you're working with. Compassion as linked to a value and as linked to our value of who we are in Brattleboro or in Windham County. Also the fun and the delight in actually enjoying that would then be linked to the compassion and the care as it relates to doing business. So I'm going to open up the floor to questions, and we can start from, oh wow, we've got two so far. Would anybody like to be my mic person? Yes, no, maybe? Thank you.
Yeah, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. So we'll keep that on, and we'll start here, and then we'll go in the back. So right here.
Just to pick up on Stephanie's point, it seems as though compassion is good business, and it sounds as though theories of compassion are not a normal part of business training. Is this an area where we could do more in Brattleboro by having opportunities for business leaders to speak to each other, and specifically about how a compassionate way of running their business is good for everybody? Comments?
That's actually a great idea, and the chamber has been trying to think of like seminars and workshops that we could do for business people. So I think that's an excellent idea.
I would agree. I think everything that we're talking about tonight is about relationships, and whether you're in business or whatever you're doing, it's not something that's formally trained typically, in any education background, and it is a way in which people can get grounded again. I think by bringing this awareness, just having this conversation tonight, for myself, preparing for it, thinking about it, it was very helpful.
I think we should probably even take a page out of Joseph's book, what he said in terms of creating a model or leading the charge is something that could tip. Because when I was in grad school getting my MBA, certainly there was not talk about values as it related to business. Certainly it may have shifted now, but why couldn't Brattleboro be the place to start putting that in our high schools and junior achievements? Would either of you like to add or answer that question that Doug asked about? You don't have to. Just
I see a lot of business owners out there, and I'd love to know their response. There's a lot of juggling that goes on when you're owning a business, and so I'm curious about if there's a need there, if there feels like a void.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, the question was around training, the link between, it seems like compassion is just good business, and how do we open up that as an opportunity, and correct me if I get this wrong, as an opportunity for training our leaders or having that as an educational opportunity?
I don't think people actually go to school for business that wind up in small business. I think people who go to school in business training wind up typically in larger business. You may go to school for architecture, that's different, not big business. So you end up with your own business. I certainly went to graduate school, had nothing to do with business, and I wind up with a small business. You end up in a small business because you love what you do, you have fun doing what you do, and you do it with compassion because you love what you are doing and still having fun doing it. So training for compassion, it's not the same as going to school to learn to be in business.
It's interesting.
Can you go to school to learn love? I guess is what passion is. Passion is a kind of a love, right?
Passion or compassion?
Compassion.
Oh, okay.
Thank
I'm
you.
just trying to.
You don't really. It's a really good question. I mean, our success as a business is that we attract people, right? You don't compel people. It's not, you attract them. You attract them to your art galleries, to your, my father, by the way, can I do a plug for my 90-year-old father who I'm really proud of? Robert Sankata, when I said, hey, you want to come to this thing? He goes, at the library? Sure, let's get out. My father, my father attracted people as a builder who would see his work and would want people to work with him. He attracted me to get interested in architecture because I saw,
Anybody who has great passion will share and show compassion.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay.
I also think that it is moving. I was noticing your B Corporation on, and that is sort of what we're talking about here of really crystallizing what makes a B Corporation different than another corporation. So that could be a nod to that learning and teaching.
Did you want to add something to answering the question?
Well, that just threw me. When you say B Corporation, I don't have any idea what a B Corporation is, as opposed to whatever. That took my question, or my comment, right? I thought maybe it's answered. I do remember what I was going to say. I didn't think that Stephanie was talking about courses and training for compassion when she spoke. What I heard her saying was, I wish we could get together. I wish we had a forum to get together, which is something that Compassionate Brattleboro could think about. Those members of Compassionate Brattleboro who are here. I've often found that an outside force providing a forum takes the burden off of the actual artists, business people, whoever, to do that. Gives them a way to do something that they really would like to do without having the burden of making it happen.
So very quickly, a B Corp is, it took us a year long to be it. Basically, you're handling environmental, social, forward-thinking businesses, and you have to prove it, and there are metrics that we had to fulfill. It took a year long for us to apply. So what you're basically doing is joining a community of fellow businesses that also invest and realize about the triple bottom line. And really, this is something Julie could speak to much more, because she's on the board of Green America, and she's the one who got us into B Corp. I'm still thrown by, or chewing the idea of making connections, and I think on each of us, I don't need to be inspired by this awesome coffee dude, or this amazing gallery owner, or this, because we're all doing good things, and I like being around them, those that I know. But I think some kind of spark with children, like high school children, or younger, might be a place, a forum where we each get to talk about our victories and hear each other's victories, but the children get to be inspired to hear where this transition jump comes from business, from education, business to compassion. I think the elusive parts of business, which are really something you don't learn in a classroom, compassion, maybe something that comes out in an interaction with children. I don't know. Does anybody feel
Joseph,
that?
can I jump in on that?
Please do.
So I started a business, we're in our 20th year right now, with two lifelong friends 19 years ago. And they have since moved on to different roles. They're still with us here on Earth. And my wife and I currently own this building, or this business, and we employ about 20 to 25 teenagers each season. It's a roadside eatery. And I think over the 19 years with this year, we'll probably have trained 150 teenagers for their first job. And this, you must bring compassion to that role, let me tell you. But it's so important to have a compassionate employer be your first employer. So, if you just have someone who's just going to dismiss you and not, meet you where you are and understand that, everything that's going on in a teenager's world, it's just not going to work. But if you can embrace that situation to teach the teenagers the value of work, the value of being a coworker, of being an employee, and then of doing their job well. What are their roles? What are their responsibilities? If you can instill that in teenagers, you get them back, and they stay working for you. So, we're in my business. We're not looking to hire anyone in the coming year. We haven't even opened yet for the season, but we have 25 people coming back to work for us. So I think it's really, again, the glue that holds that all together, that starts that with those teenagers, is that compassion.
Thank you. We're going to go to the next question.
Wait.
Oh, sorry.
A little plug for Adam's Roadside Eatery. He modestly points it. If you haven't been to Wahoo's and you're going to the lake, it's a great way to feed yourself and get to the lake quickly and watch the sunset. The folks that he employs and he and his wife employ are always motivated and always kind of fun, and it's always a cool thing to be around there. So.
Next question.
I'm wondering about the word compassion, and I find it a very general word. So I'm thinking the goal is to have compassion be functional, practical, humane, and so that actually I see compassion as being broken down into two elements: heart thinking with brain thinking. And the compassion combines the two, and that relationship is going to vary with each situation, that sometimes the situation is going to be more brain thinking than heart thinking, and that it takes judgment and understanding and compassion to try and balance those two elements. But in order to come out at the end with functionality and humaneness, it seems as though both those elements have to be included, because definitely too much brain thinking or too much heart thinking can be harmful. Comment on that.
Thomas Jefferson penned a book, an architect, by the way, penned a book called Conversations Between My Head and My Heart, or My Head and My Heart, and it's a really good point you bring. I'll leave it at that. There are great minds who wondered about the balance and the tight walk between those two.
Did you want to say something to that?
Thanks to this wonderful group and this wonderful moderator. And it's just great listening to this and seeing compassion in practice in this fashion. I'm hoping that, and I think Shanta will ask you this question before we close, that we can get from you some very specific suggestions of what you would like to see on the agenda of the select board, on the agenda of Compassionate Brattleboro, that you think from your perspective could be helpful in bringing more compassion to our town. But let me ask two specific questions, if I may. One of them is that in attending select board meetings, I have to say that some of the most moving moments that I witnessed had to do with you, Kate, and your handling of this very tricky topic of panhandling. And if you're not sure about how tricky it is, just ask Will Hunter, who's right over here. But your comments and your voting were really very inspiring, and I wonder if you could say a few words about that. And then just one more thing, which is Stephanie and I had a chance to discuss a suggestion made by another member of the select board, that we try to involve business by providing businesses with compassion certificates that they could put in their windows. And the bar would be low, so any business doing any of these good things could get a compassion certificate. And then I remember one business leader, as we were talking together and with some business leaders, one of them said, "I don't want a compassion certificate in my window because people are bothering me enough. And I don't need any more people pestering me for give to this and do this and do that." And how do you deal with that dilemma?
That's a good dilemma. I'll go to the select board, then the panhandling discussion first. I appreciate your comments a lot. It was actually a difficult discussion to have, as you said, and we had it over several meetings, and it really came about. It started whether or not we should put a sign in the parking lots on the pay and display meters saying you can't panhandle here. What was fascinating about the discussion, we get people that come to the select board meetings all the time for public participation, but during these discussions, the seats were all full. And I remember saying, after listening to everybody, nobody's 100% right and no one's 100% wrong. Because everybody was coming to the discussion with their own feelings, their own experiences, and people would talk about the negative experience they had when somebody came up and asked them for money. Other people said, I've never had a negative experience. I've only been approached by soft-spoken people who are asking me. That's when, I said, nobody here is right and nobody here is wrong, because you're all coming from this from a different perspective. And, it was a conversation that at times was very tense. And, in the end, the select board chose not to put the signs up. They sort of evolved over several meetings. And there was a debate whether the language was judgmental, or the language was actually scaring people, or the language was making people feel that somebody who was actually not doing anything wrong was doing something wrong. The chamber also chose not to have their logo be on the sign as well. But it really was, and I think it showed that there are people in the community, no matter what side you're on. You can say we're on sides on the panhandling issue, but I really don't see it as being on this one side or another. We're coming from a place where we're on the side of our town and our community. So, and I know you were there for those discussions, and it's obviously something that we still discuss a lot. But it was you can go back and watch the meetings on BCTV, because it was interesting and it was difficult, and it really was one of that and the discussion on diversity in town government were probably during my 6 years on the select board, those were really probably the hardest discussions that we've had, but I think the most important discussions that we had. You spend a lot of time, as Shanta knows, on the select board dealing with budgets and liquor licenses and dangerous dogs and sidewalks and potholes, so you really don't have much of an opportunity to have discussions like that. And I'm going to just talk about my former life for 1 second, because it was what I thought about a lot of times during those discussions. I worked in the governor's office for Howard Dean during the civil union debate that we had, and it was someday I can tell you about that. It was another fascinating, agonizing discussion and debate that we had in this state. And I remember after Howard signed the bill, he hadn't planned to run for re-election, but he said, because he'd been governor at that point for almost 10 years, and it's like enough. But he decided he had to run for re-election because it would be a referendum on civil unions. And if he didn't run, there would never be a statewide actual vote on, we don't have referendums, but his election, if he was reelected, it was, okay, the state's okay with civil unions. If he wasn't, it was going to be overturned. So he ran, and thankfully he won. And, he was asked the question a lot, did you ever hesitate on signing this? And he said, as a governor, every day we deal with the budgets and we deal with all this stuff. He said, but I had to sign it because I couldn't get up and look in the mirror and not have signed this bill, because it's once in a lifetime, do you get to do something that's so impactful on other people's lives? And I'm not equating the conversation we had about panhandling to signing the civil unions, but in many ways for our town, that was a kind of discussion that's sort of a once in a year's worth or whatever discussions that we can have and really look at ourselves in the mirror and say, what kind of community do we want to be? So that was probably too deep, but that's sort of what that conversation was in some ways like. And to the question on the compassionate certificates, I think that it is interesting what you just said, that there's some people like, I don't want people to bug me anymore. So I don't know what the right answer to that one is, but I think it's a good idea. And I hadn't thought about the pitfall of people being bugged.
I want to. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I went on too long.
I want to offer that after a couple of the panelists add to answering this question, that we might also go around and give the audience an opportunity to answer that question about suggestions for the, either the town, capital T town, or capital T town in terms of all of us. So, yeah.
In our discussion with the certification, I think that it goes to your point too, that how do you measure something like that? And that when you said, oh, we'll keep the bar low, I remember the response was, we don't want it low. And we want to be proud of what this certificate represents. And then the other really, really clear message from that certification discussion was that it is hard to wave your flag. My reticence in coming up here is feeling like it's bragging. And that certification idea rang to that, is that we business owners don't do this. We do it because it's the right thing, not because we want a gold medal. The heart and mind comment, I just found myself just thinking about that a little bit more. And you know what came up for me is that it's really resonating, and sometimes you do have to separate those two things as a business owner. And the image that came to my mind is, I grew up here and my parents owned the bookseller in the Brooks house. And I remember walking in one day after school and my mom was crying in the back, which is really disturbing as a child. And my dad said to me, it's okay, Stephanie, she just had to fire someone. He said the name. She just had to fire Michael. And it really impacted me as just sort of a thing that gets done is not how it is at all. It's really, really in that heart space. And actually, humorously, fast forward many years, and I had to fire my first employee at my first job. And my boss gave me a big pep talk. And I took the employee and I talked to him. And I came back into the office and I was crying. And my boss said, how did it go? And I said, he convinced me to make sure that he got his job back. So I said yes. Failed. But that was all my heart, not my mind.
I'm going to, for anyone in the audience, speaking to either the question about suggestions for, actually just general suggestions of how do we make this actionable, that gap between doing business in Brattleboro and acting out of a place of compassion, or suggestions that we might hand over to the select board. And also thinking about that, what appears to often be the gap between heart thinking and brain thinking. Any comments about that before we go on to the next question?
I have a rather odd comment. I've been thinking...
It's on.
It's on. Hi. I've been thinking about my time out of the country for 10 years, where there was the way people deal with business is very different from here. I was in France, and I've been thinking about the relationship between us, the consumers, and you, the business people, the business community. And there is a protocol. You walk into a business and you say, bonjour, monsieur, madame, mesdames, whatever. You just say that, and the place can be empty. You don't have you may not see anyone there, but you never walk into a store without that. We have changed that in our culture, it seems to me, with big business, where you go, you do your business, you do it fast, you do it efficiently, and you don't know anybody there, and so forth. I think our culture is very much impacted by that. That's one of the joys of living in Vermont, in a smaller town. And I can't help but think that it affects businesses to have customers walk in. So I'm suddenly thinking about compassion the other way, and how to, that it's like what is it, a torus situation, energy wheel, where the energy that comes in is the energy that goes out, is the energy that comes in, is the energy goes out. And I don't know what to say about that, or I don't have a specific question to ask, except to say that that is on my mind, and that it isn't just what can you do to be more compassionate, but how can we be more compassionate together? How can we shift that back to something? And I think it is back to something that is two-way.
Hi, thank you. My name is Ricky Rosati, and I've been practicing Buddhism for the last 10, 11 years, and I was recently elected to the ADA committee in Brattleboro, and I struggle with expressing compassion towards the amount of mis- and undereducation around civil rights history movements in America in elementary schools and high schools and colleges. Those should not be elective courses, those should be mandatory so that people are aware of the oppression that we're coming from and surviving from, and the failure of the state to intervene in a positive, progressive way. And we, as a municipality, we can start enforcing discrimination testing that the state is not complying with. That can be within housing, first of all, so that we can welcome people of color to housing, and then from there, employment, especially within the government. I congratulate Shanta for being the first person of color in the select board, but that's a really hard position. I can't even imagine how hard of a position that is, and I respect so much, but I'm so sorry that the amount of white complacency that has been made and been the result of us not expressing equality and sanctuary sooner, even though Vermont was the first state to emancipate the enslaved people.
Thank you. Thank you, Ricky. Did you want to say something?
Just a correction. Vermont is awesome because it never allowed slavery. It also was the first state to have free education. And it was the first state that said love doesn't belong to one group of people.
Hi, I'm Leah Goodman, and I'm here really to support all the businesses in Brattleboro because we love you. And I have to say, as somebody who's done fundraising and events and communications and marketing for a lot of nonprofits, just as a volunteer around here, I've never seen such a group of welcoming, wonderful, generous businesses anywhere I've lived, and I've lived all over the world. There's always a way to have a conversation with a business in Brattleboro about giving. I've never had anyone turn me down on a proposal, and sometimes they have certain requirements or things they need, or that's absolutely fine. I feel like this town is great when it comes to compassion. I don't think we should feel self-conscious about our compassion. We are compassionate, and I just want all the businesses to know that I see you, I see your compassion, and I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Do we have other comments or thoughts? Or Kit, did you have another question or comment?
Directly from the businesses. They are saying that panhandling is hurting them. That's a black and white fact from the mouths of the businesses. I don't know how that's being addressed, and somehow I feel as though it got skipped over.
So I want to make sure we don't go down the rabbit hole, because I know that and I'm not going to mute it, but I know that when it comes to individuals who are asking for money, that can fast track very quickly, excuse my language, into a bitching session. So I do want to be very careful about that, and I want to maybe, if I may, open that up to be thinking about maybe as a business existing within Windham County. I think there was just a recent report about, deaths as related to opioids, for example, and how that's impacting. I'm going to open up the question and say, as a business and trying to practice compassion, or as you're working with businesses and trying to practice compassion, within an environment much like what's going on in the rest of America, how do you maintain that and navigate between individuals who may need help or hurting or displaced? How do you balance that? So I'm going to just shape that question so that it's not just focused on one thing. Would anybody like to take it, either in the audience or on the panel?
I can give a quick answer, or one of my non-answers. I think what's interesting about the whole topic of the way Shanta just spelled it out is, and I said this I think before, there's no right answer and there's no wrong answer. We all come from different places and our experiences are different, and just because we don't choose to do something like someone else would, it doesn't mean we're less compassionate. And again, I'm right down at the chamber, and we're downtown, and we see many people who hang out in Plenty Park. And last week there was an individual who was sleeping on one of the benches, and somebody came into the chamber and said, "I want you folks to know there's somebody sleeping on the benches." So I went out, and it was really cold, even though it's like April, it's not supposed to be so cold. It was one of those really, really cold days, and I made one phone call, and a couple hours later I went back out to check, and the person was still there. So this time I called the police department, and I talked to the dispatcher, and the dispatcher, she said to me, "Does this person have this color code on or whatever?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, I'll send an officer down, not to arrest this person, but I'll send an officer down, but that individual does not want to go to a shelter." And, of course, I'm all worried, going, "Oh, we got to get this person to a shelter." But the person always says, "No, I do not want to go to a shelter," when they're offered assistance. And so, I was all worried about it, and I thought, well, you can't force someone to do something that's not right for them. So I think in some ways that's another issue. What's right for me might not necessarily be right for someone else, and how I would choose to solve a problem might not be how somebody else chooses to do it. So I really think that we have to keep that in mind when we're deciding what's right to do for a person and what's not right. And it's not an easy thing to do, and I sort of had to let it go that day, that I was really, really concerned about this person. But I'm still concerned about the person, but I realized it's out of my control what that person chooses to do.
Thank you.
I don't think the issue is being skirted over. It is so present and such a concern of the entire downtown. And part of the concern is not exactly how it's perceived as, we don't want this because it hurts business. It goes back to that compassion of, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And so it's hard to even discuss it when there isn't an action that we're all moving cohesively together. But certainly there are groups and coalitions. And I just held a merchants meeting on Tuesday to talk about holiday, And I could not get these merchants to talk about holiday. They wanted to talk about the safety of our older generation and lights downtown, and it is omnipresent, this issue. And there is several different groups, one being the Community Response Project, and my wordlessness is there isn't a cohesive action that we're all able to rally our emotions around.
I'm going to piggyback off of what Stephanie said, and just from the work that I've been doing as an investigative journalist, I can honestly tell you, I'm not going to speak for all businesses, I don't have the right to do that, but I can tell you each individual I've talked to, just businesses in Brattleboro in general, individuals just want to know what to do, how can they help, how can they discern the individuals who really need the help versus someone who's running game, like how, and that's a real thing, like how do they do that? And so this is something that people are very much struggling with, and what are the tools to kind of know, like on a deeper human level. So I can honestly say it's something, and there isn't, like what Kate is saying, I get the sense there is not necessarily, I mean, having sat on the select board and also on the other side as just a regular resident now, you having an answer for how do you wrap your arms around all these things is very complicated, and also, may I add, it's not what you think on the surface. Is there anybody else in the panel who would like to speak to that?
It's bigger than just the issue in town here. I think is for me, my understanding of compassion is that you want to help, you want to embrace the person where they are, but that doesn't make you responsible for solving the challenge. So if you bring that to that conversation, I think you eventually will get to the solution. You're not responsible, but you want to solve it. And if we have enough people wanting to solve it, it'll happen.
Yeah.
Do we have more? Yes, another question.
Hi. So, do business owners and people in government, like the select board, do they have any, will they act with any accountability and responsibility to consider using the $5 million worth of town's money that they're putting in reserve in a bank to accrue interest? Would they use that towards reparations for people of color and survivors of genocide instead, or put a fraction amount reserved for them to accommodate welcoming them here and to recover and rehabilitate from the trauma that they are experiencing currently from racial profiling and every facet of life?
I think that might be a question for you to talk to Peter about, or set up a meeting. But so no, I don't want to get down that rabbit hole because it's not directly related, but I would suggest that you might want to talk to them directly.
There's more people that need to be responsible for that than just one man.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just saying, given your question, was there another question or thought? Yes, Doug.
Well, just
So sorry. Was there another hand I didn't see?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I don't know. In this space 2 weeks from today, we will be meeting with the town manager, the chief of police, and the chair of the select board to talk about compassion within town government and the responsibilities that town government has, and how can those be exercised with compassion. So that's here in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Was there another hand on this side?
Thank you. I'm Sue Graff. I live in town, and I also work for the state, but I'm speaking personally. And most of my background's in nonprofit management, and I would quote Mr. Rogers and say, look for the helpers. Nonprofits are businesses too, so I know, and I appreciate some of the panelists bring that perspective as well, but I think in terms of compassion, compassion is a practice, as somebody has said, and compassion is a choice. So you could choose to support the organizations in town who have made it their mission to support those among us who need help. You don't have to do that, but that's something actionable, that's something real. And the folks that want help can avail themselves and are being reached out to as well. So I just want to sort of highlight nonprofits as kind of the invisible businesses in town. Some of them are very visible, we do good work, and we're easily overlooked, and I think it's a piece of the puzzle. Nonprofits alone are not responsible for fixing our social problems. Town government is not responsible for fixing our social problems. Businesses aren't responsible for fixing our social problems. Collectively, we're cumulatively responsible and collectively responsible. So compassion is a great practice, and just to go back to the sort of the certificate idea, as a practice, if business owners are practicing their values and running their businesses and hiring people in that value-based model, you're going to feel whether it's a compassionate business or not. I don't need to see a certificate on your window. I know which businesses in town are compassionate. I know which business owners are compassionate. I know which businesses I want to support with my money. I know which businesses I don't. So we feel that, we get it, we know it, and just trust that we don't necessarily need you to have a certificate on your window, and we value you and we appreciate what you're doing. So as somebody who lives here and spends lots of money here, I appreciate that you're here. I want to support you, and I want to encourage those of you who are looking for something to do that's actionable to spend your money in the places that you value and support the organizations that are doing the work that is pretty invisible and that most of us in the room don't want to do, but we're really grateful that it's getting done. So thank you.
Thank you, Sue, for that. I just want to definitely echo what both Sue and Ricky Rosati were saying in terms of, even though these conversations are very much focused on business and compassion or compassion and town, et cetera, that it really is a responsibility for all of us to be thinking about how do we all play our part, how do we all contribute to that bigger. And also, at the end of the series, nothing will have been solved, but this is just at least to get the ball rolling and thinking about it. We are at 8:10, wrapping up in about 5 minutes. Are there any last burning questions or thoughts, either from the panel or from any of, yes, back there. Yeah, hi, Bob. Yes.
So maybe it's a question, maybe it's an observation, but for a couple of weeks now I've been trying to meditate on a particular verse in the Quran, which goes something like, we created you into tribes and nations so that you would understand each other, not that you would despise each other. And from the business point of view, for the last 3 days I've been trying to sell potato chips at Dottie's Discount Foods. But the co-op has had an anger, and we're part of the co-op. The co-op has had a anger reduction program for certain staff. And in that training, one of the pieces that came out is ask questions. And so, going back to the person at Planning Park, it's not always easy to do that. I've tried to ask questions in that situation, and we didn't get very far with answers. But in other cases, asking questions starts that conversation. Needs time. It can go down a rabbit hole, but it's a way of dealing. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
I'm impressed you're reading the Quran. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
It's cool.
Any other burning thoughts? They don't have to be burning, but they can just be thoughts or questions as we wrap up. Yes?
I just wanted to share that when I worked freelance in downtown Springfield, Mass. When I worked freelance in downtown Springfield, Mass, it got around that the lady with the long black leather coat was generous. And I did have an hour for lunch,
it got a little out of control. And so I had to learn limits. And I remember when welfare reform happened, I did not agree with it. And since then, we've got a huge homeless problem. And but I can't take care of everybody. And I think that it is all of us, like you said, it's all of our responsibility. And so I think I had to budget. I didn't want to stop giving, but I had to budget and I had to learn. And that was important. I did have to learn in all areas of my life that I had to say, I'm so sorry, I don't have anything today, but I hope that you get what you need. And so I vote accordingly. And I'm hoping that, everybody in the country will agree, because this is a problem not just for little Brattleboro. This is a problem that we can all handle, and we have more money on the planet than ever before, because it doesn't go down a drain, it gets handed over. So there's plenty of money. And it's not in Brattleboro per se, but I just, I think we can't allow, when you're running a business, you have to have limits, but you do have expenses. And one of the expenses as a human being is that we have to pay our share for our community, whether it be for potholes or for the downtrodden. And that's why I think it's important that that's the purpose of government. The business has to have that bottom line and the margins and that's how you compete. But when government takes that responsibility to say, okay, all businesses have to pay this tax rate, blah, 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 you have these deductions. And so it's a government problem. And that businesses can compete when they all have to follow the same rules. So it's kind of hard for small towns to deal with this problem that is a national responsibility. And that's all I have to add. Thank you.
So I'm gonna wrap. Oh, I will take two last, and let's keep it short, and then I'm gonna wrap.
I just want to say thank you so much for this important forum. But it's not done. It's really wonderful because I think all of the different subjects are so meaningful for our community. The only thing I wanted to say is that compassion is a choice. And I'm going to leave it at that. And so think about what compassion is for you and perhaps for this community. And I'm running around with power bars. Energy bars. I'm actually giving away energy bars. Sorry.
So I would be interested in just a brief sentence from maybe each of the panelists, and maybe you too, Shanta. If the Brattleboro community succeeds in its aspiration to become more compassionate, will that be good or bad for business, and in what way?
Why don't we do this all the way down the line, and then we'll end with me rapping. Do you want to start, Stephanie?
Can't imagine why not. Yes.
Compassion attracts, and businesses want to attract.
I agree with absolutely everything that was just said. So yeah, I think it would be a great thing for our town, and I think it would be more successful.
Absolutely. Compassion allows you to win at the game of life. If you're winning the game of life, business will be better, the community will be better.
I will say for my answer, I have one. I'm wearing it. I'm wired. If Brattleboro succeeds in becoming compassionate in terms of businesses, and I will piggyback, yes, businesses, nonprofits, organizations, solopreneurs, whoever you are, I think that that would also include being very accessible to all who not just visit, but to all who live here. Because, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm so interested in closing so many of the gaps that are here. We have so many divides and gaps and silos, just like any other place. And so to me, a successful Compassionate Brattleboro will be one, maybe all the gaps are not closed, but maybe there's just a sliver. And more people will feel like things are accessible to them, because so far, that's what I keep hearing over and over again. Things do not feel accessible to a lot of people who live here. In wrapping, I first want to thank all of the panelists. Thank you so very much. And I want to reiterate, no one was chosen because they were a model of. They were just individuals who happened to be representative of working with so many different organizations as well. And also, we could only have so much panel space. But we're so also very thankful and appreciative of all of you who came and contributed to this conversation. And I want to just remind, because I will, for people who know me well, I'm not the most compassionate person. I don't view myself as that. I struggle with it. I'm very human. I'm from an urban environment, city environment, and I don't always act out of that place with a capital C. But I've practiced mostly trying to be more compassionate towards myself, so that I can also be very present as a community member. And so as we think about compassion, let's think about the ways that we also think about giving back to ourselves and taking care of ourselves, so that then we can take care of others and our neighbors. We also are not going to agree on what compassion means and whether or not that's the right answer to anything. That's fine too. I like a little tension. So let's keep thinking about this. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for your time and for coming out.